has been arrested in Chicago. In 1 hour, we hear from police in Chicago, and we will take you there live. It is breaking news at this hour, and I'm Bill Hemmer live here in New York City.
And it is breaking fast. Good morning to you, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. Prosecutors filing a felony charge against Smollett, saying he filed a false police report. And the New York Post cover this morning summing it all up in a word: liar. New surveillance video showing you have evidence that those two brothers at the center of the case were buying supplies used in the attack. They say the Empire Star asked them to participate, and here is their attorney.
This has been very traumatizing to them, as well as everyone who knows this story. There was a point where this story needed to be told, and they manned up and they said, you know what, we're going to correct this. So plea deal, immunity, all of that, they don't care about that. I think that Jesse's conscience is probably not letting him sleep right now, so I think he should unload that conscience and just come out and tell the American people what actually happened.
So that was last night. This is this morning. Matt Finn's live outside police headquarters there in Chicago. Let's begin there. Matt, good morning.
Bill, good morning. Chicago police tell us that Jussie Smollett arranged to turn himself in away from the cameras at 5 o'clock this morning with the presence of his attorneys. It happened without incident, and Jussie Smollett's mugshot is scheduled to be released after the press conference at 9 a.m. local time this morning. Right now, Jussie Smollett is being represented by at least 3 attorneys, including high-profile criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos. Smollett initially was cooperating with police as they investigated his report that he was beat by President Trump supporters who he claims called him racial and homophobic slurs. But then the two brothers associated with this alleged hoax were interrogated by police, and the investigation dramatically shifted. At that point, Smollett stopped talking to police. It is our understanding that Smollett never responded to Chicago police's request for a follow-up interview that they made last Saturday. So police took their case to a grand jury where they got the felony charge approved and the ability to arrest Smollett. Smollett's attorney released a statement writing, quote, "Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense." New video also shows the Osundaro brothers apparently buying supplies, including ski masks, gloves, and hats. The Osundaro brothers also testified for 2.5 hours before a grand jury yesterday. Their attorney says the brothers did get some type of payment from Smollett, but not according to the narrative the public might think. The brothers' attorney praises police's meticulous investigation and says the truth will be revealed.
When I say that the police spent countless man-hours trying to piece this together, I mean that. I absolutely mean that. When I say that my clients spent countless hours getting their story out there to the police so that they could do their work, I mean that too.
That woman, the attorney for the brothers, says she does not expect police to charge the 2 men associated with this alleged hoax. Bill,
what about the federal level, Matt? Could he also be in trouble with federal investigators here today?
Yes, he could. The FBI is investigating an alleged death threat letter that Smollett received a week before this alleged hoax, and if the FBI determines he is the one who sent that threat through the mail and or lied to them, he is facing federal charges. And, here at police headquarters, I can't tell you that there are police officers and detectives who are clearly upset by this entire thing. From the beginning, I was talking to Chicago police sources and people within the city of Chicago who did not want to doubt Jussie Smollett, but felt like they were being duped by this claim and that precious resources were being wasted here in this city that currently annually has a murder rate that's higher than New York and LA combined. So if it is determined that Jussie Smollett is found guilty of this alleged hoax, he could pay some, or be required to pay some pretty serious restitution to this city. Sandra,
right,
Bill.
Appreciate that. 1 hour from now, Chicago Police, 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock there in Chicago, Matt Finn, Police Headquarters. Thank you, sir. 4 past the hour.
Thanks to Matt there. Well, the Trump administration telling ISIS bride Hoda Muthana she cannot come home again. The president and secretary of state saying the woman and her 18-month-old son will not be allowed back into the country because she is not an American citizen, claiming her family and lawyer dispute. Kevin Cork is live at the White House this morning. Kevin, what is the White House saying about her U.S. citizenship?
Yeah, a great question. She was actually born in New Jersey, but as you well know, Sandra, there are a number of ways you can actually forfeit your citizenship. In fact, let me take you to Twitter and share just a bit of what the president had to say about this story. It's been one that has been in the news a great deal. You saw the particular person, Hoda Mathana, all over the media saying she wants to come back home. Here's what the president said. He said, "I have instructed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he fully agrees, not to allow Hoda Mathana to come back into the country." She was born in New Jersey. She was actually living in the state of Alabama, at which point she had a turn in her life and she began to support ISIS. In fact, she had a number of posts on social media where she was calling for death and destruction here in the U.S. Here's what Mike Pompeo had to say about her this morning.
I don't get the heartstrings deal. This is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist. She's not coming back. President Trump made clear that she wasn't coming back. She's not a U.S. citizen. She is not entitled to U.S. citizenship, and she's not coming back to our country to pose a threat.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, by the way, her attorney center this morning, actually yesterday, I should point out, on Twitter, showed her birth certificate and paperwork that seemed to document the fact that her father was no longer in the diplomatic corps, and thus she was an American citizen when she was born here. But as you also know, there are a number of U.S. statutes that could cause you to lose your citizenship, especially if you go abroad to fight with a foreign enemy.
We will find out a lot more from the attorney representing her in just a bit. Meanwhile, Kevin, what are we hearing about the latest timeline on the possible release of the long-awaited Mueller report?
Have you not been waiting long enough for this thing? I mean, it's not just you, it's not just me, it's not just the American people. The entire world has been hearing about this for a great deal of time. We're actually hearing more and more reports now that that report could be in the hands of the Attorney General, Bill Barr, as soon as the end of this week, according to one report that we actually saw this morning. Others suggest it'll happen next week. Of course, the president is leaving the country. We'll have to see what the timing is like. Speaking of, here's what the president had to say when he was asked yesterday if he thought the report should be made public.
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General. He's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him. The new Attorney General, yes. I guess from what I understand, that will be totally up to the Attorney General.
The Attorney General, Bill Barr, who was previously an Attorney General, he is back. He could have the report in his hands, and he has said publicly he'd like to get out as much as possible, although he has the final say about what from that report will be made public. We've waited long enough. Hopefully we'll end up with it in our hands soon enough, Sandra. We'll see.
Soon enough. Thank you, Kevin Cork at the White House.
Meanwhile, we got the 2020 hopefuls already grappling with socialism. Now they're trying to figure out how far is too far left. Karl Rove writes in the Wall Street Journal today, under the headline, "Every billionaire is a policy mistake." Karl Rove's live with me from Austin, Texas. Sir, good day to you. I'm going to read the first line in your piece today, okay? Here it is on screen. "Once upon a time," you write, "Democrats worked to reduce income inequality by raising up those on the bottom of the economic ladder with the government's help. Even efforts to tax the rich at higher rates to fund these programs were tempered by a desire not to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. That view has been replaced by a deep hostility to wealth." Your words, explain, sir.
Well, I was taken by the Twitter handle of one of the top aides to Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Every billionaire is a policy failure. And I've also been taken by the language of other Democrats who've been following her. Representative Ocasio-Cortez. She herself said any system that allows billionaires while people have ringworm in Alabama is wrong. And Elizabeth Warren, billionaires are freeloaders. Senator Sanders now entered into the presidential contest. Billionaires are insatiable greed, and they're destroying the fabric of our country. Well, you know, last time I looked, Bill Gates did us a great favor by inventing the Microsoft operating system that popularized the personal computer. Steve Jobs did us a great thing by helping attract more people to personal computers, and then inventing the iPad and the iPod and the smartphone with the iPhone. I mean, these people made money because the value of their companies grew. They didn't take big salaries. In some instances, they paid themselves $1 a year, but their wealth came from building a company that serves the vital interests of American consumers and helps make our lives better and easier. But the richest man on the face of the planet, Jeff Bezos. 566,000 people have jobs in an enterprise that 20 years ago had nobody except one guy with a vision thinking about what to do. So
you should lay out the debate, the public debate that will be had here. But Bernie Sanders is crushing it, Carl. He's an avowed socialist, right? Look what he did in 24 hours. He raised about $6 million, and that dwarfs Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Klobuchar. Quick comment on that. He is a funding force, Carl.
Well, he raised $230 million for his 2016 challenge to Hillary Clinton and never attended a single fundraiser. He has one of the most amazing and extraordinary fundraising donor lists in American history. In fact, Act Blue, this fundraising machine that helped so many Democrats last time around, is built upon two pillars: the Howard Dean donor list from 2004 and the Bernie Sanders donor list from 2016. He's going to have a financial advantage in the 2020 presidential primaries on the Democratic side.
You're right.
Yes,
and they've been waiting for him to come back around for a couple years, too. Quickly, I want to squeeze this in. Andrew McCabe has done a significant tour this week. The president talked about him yesterday at the White House. Watch here.
I think Andrew McCabe has made a fool out of himself over the last couple of days, and he really looks to me like sort of a poor man's J. Edgar Hoover. I think he's a disaster. And what he was trying to do was terrible, and he was caught.
So you've seen the interviews. What did we learn this week from McCabe?
Well, first of all, we didn't learn some things we should have learned. Scott Pelley blew it, I think, on Sunday night in 60 Minutes. He should have gotten into one of the most critical facts, which is, why was Trump angry with Comey? And it was because Comey was telling him in private, you're not a suspect, but refusing to say that publicly. And that was one of the things that the president was most upset about. So, look, this feeds into the president's narrative that the deep state was trying to get him out. And McCabe added to that this week by talking about the attempt to remove the president on the basis of the 25th Amendment.
Nice to see you, buddy. Carl Rove, live in Austin, Texas. Thank you so much for coming in today. In the meantime, Sandra, next Wednesday, there's a public hearing for Michael Cohen. A public hearing on a day where the president is meeting with Chairman Kim in Hanoi talking about nuclear weapons. You wonder whether or not that hearing will go as scheduled, or whether or not it's delayed one more time.
Right now it's
Tough
on.
thing to do when you're overseas. That's right.
Going to be a big day, going to be a big week next week. Meanwhile, back to one of our top stories of the morning. She joined ISIS and called for the death of America. Now a woman from Alabama says she wants to come home from Syria. What the president has to say about this ISIS bride. We will be speaking to her attorney on this program in a bit.
Also, President Trump gearing up for that summit we just mentioned a moment ago, why he's not letting up on sanctions against the North. We'll talk to General Jack Keane about what we can expect from this one. Next.
And also the lawyers for the Covington Catholic High School students, Nick Salmon, are speaking out, accusing the Washington Post of a modern form of McCarthyism. We'll speak to one of those attorneys. That will be coming up next.
They're attacking falsely a child.
I am really...
Things have got to change, and there's got to be accountability.
Fox News alert, we want to bring you some video just coming into us from a few moments ago in Washington. An inside look at high-level trade discussions as they continue and come up against a very important March 1st deadline. The White House just a couple days ago did signal some flexibility on that date. It moved markets. In that room, you can see the Chinese delegation. This is the U.S. delegation on one side, the Chinese delegation on the other. Larry Kudlow, Steve Mnuchin, Robert Lighthizer are there trying to hash out a deal with China. As you can imagine, we will bring you any live news from this as we get it. That is a long-awaited moment.
I haven't taken sanctions off. I'd love to be able to, but in order to do that, we have to do something that's meaningful on the other side. But Chairman Kim and I have a very good relationship. I wouldn't be surprised to see something work out.
We'll see what the expectations games will be for next week. President Trump saying sanctions are still in place on North Korea. They could ramp it up, in fact, if they wanted to. He's confident reaching a nuclear agreement with Chairman Kim. Second summit next week in Vietnam. Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star general. Sir, good morning to you and welcome here. What would you consider a success next week, General?
Yeah, well, clearly we've been stalemated for some time, since the last summit. I think a breakthrough from the United States perspective would be that North Korea would give us a timetable to denuclearize with independent inspectors on the scene to observe that denuclearization. That would be a significant breakthrough. I suspect, Bill, we will not get that.
what we may get is another dismantling of some kind of nuclear site. Maybe one of their major nuclear plants where they develop this technology. And we will not get the clear path to denuclearization that the United States is demanding.
Would that be a disappointment? Clearly, I think it would be. Mike Pompeo was making the rounds this morning. He was on NBC. He was also here with Maria on Fox Business and said this.
You have to remember where we came into this. We came in when missiles were being tested, nuclear weapons were being tested. We haven't had tests of either of those types of systems for well over a year now. No one expects that North Korea will take this action. I think the work that we've done, the economic sanctions that have been in place, the negotiations that President Trump has led, I hope one day we all wake up and we get a moment just like the one that the world had in 1989.
November of 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down. If you do not get what you're describing, General, which you don't anticipate, as you just stated, you could ramp up the sanctions. You could open up an office in North Korea. You could open up diplomatic relations to a greater degree. Would that be considered good enough, however, sir?
Well, I think I'm going to take the president. Remember what he's been saying recently is I'm in no rush. Now, most people are looking at that as some kind of a concession on his part. I look at it as that I'm going to stick with these sanctions for as long as it takes and continue to squeeze North Korea, that I'm not going to back off on economic sanctions. After all, Bill, that is what brought North Korea to the table. And Secretary Pompeo is right. I mean, clearly they've made progress and there's been no nuclear testing or ballistic missile testing for 15 months. But that is not the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective is disarm nuclear weapons and disarm ballistic missiles.
Okay, sir, I want to squeeze in a question here about the Middle East. There's a group known as IP3. What they're trying to do is get the U.S. government to oversee our U.S. contractors to establish nuclear power in the Middle East. Why is that so important from your view, sir?
Well, frankly, the Arab states have legitimate needs for nuclear power because as they become more industrialized, more and more of their oil is being used for domestic purposes as opposed to export revenue. So that's number one. Number two is IP3, a company that I'm associated with, has concerns because if you're going to build 30 or 40 nuclear power plants, Bill, in the most dangerous and volatile neighborhood in the world, you really have to stitch together a security plan to deal with that, both integrated and comprehensive. And what we're talking about is overhead satellites, drones, sophisticated cyber defense, outside the wire, best-in-class security, and the United States imposed safety and security standards inside the nuclear power plant. The United States is the only country that if it passes nuclear technology in terms of building power plants for that country, that will insist on a 1, 2, 3 agreement, which means this, that country cannot weaponize that nuclear energy power. And there is no other country that would impose that on a foreign country who wants to build nuclear power. So that is why we want the United States in here. We don't want Russia and China running the table on nuclear power in the Middle East.
It's a big topic, one we'll continue to discuss down the road. Thank you, General. Jack Keane there in Washington. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good talking to you, Bill.
Two big stories breaking at this hour. A disturbing discovery at the home of a Coast Guard officer. Prosecutors now calling him a domestic terrorist. Details on that straight ahead. And we are awaiting a news conference by Chicago police, waiting on new details on the Jussie Smollett arrest. What we can expect to hear next.
He's going to be arraigned. I think we'll see the superintendent make a public announcement that'll tell us what the evidence was, what the investigation revealed, why they brought these charges forward. We're also seeing a parallel investigation by federal authorities. If he truly was in charge of sending that white powder letter to himself, that's a serious issue that he's going to have to deal with in possibly the federal courts as well.
We're waiting on police at the top of the hour. They're going to give us an update on this case. The charge that we're looking at in this case, Daniel, can you shed some light on that? Disorderly conduct. It's a class 4 felony. The lowest felony classification carries the potential sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. What more can you tell us about that?
Anyone who makes a false report to police can be charged with a crime. Sometimes people make that report because, they were involved in a drug deal and got robbed, and they didn't want to tell the true circumstances of why they were where they were or why they were in the situation they were in. This was a completely made-up event, it seems. That's what the evidence seems to prove, and a total waste of resources by the Chicago Police Department, as well as undermining legitimate victims. I'm afraid this could have a chilling effect on real victims who would maybe not want to come forward for fear that they might not be believed due to this credibility being taken away from this event. So I think we had 20 homicides in January in Chicago, and certainly the Chicago police could have been spending time trying to find those people responsible and not wasting resources in this investigation. However, to their credit, I think Mr. Smet might have thought that he could make this report and the police wouldn't take it seriously and wouldn't do an investigation. These detectives did exactly what they needed to do. They went and followed the truth, followed the evidence, and found out that this, in fact, seems to be an elaborate hoax.
Smollett's attorneys, two of them, have released a statement saying that they will actively fight these charges. And here's the statement from them saying, like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this, one where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense. What did you think or take away from that statement?
His attorneys are doing what they should be doing. I know Chicago police wanted to have a conversation with him when it looked like he was a suspect in the case. They rightfully so didn't allow that conversation to occur where he could have incriminated himself. The police will have to put together evidence that goes with their version of events. There is going to potentially be a treasure trove. Those letters, there are handwriting experts that can look at that and determine who wrote it. We can analyze the ink. The Postal Service is very good at analyzing products that come into their system, finding video of people dropping them off. All of the physical evidence, if they've got videotape of the brothers purchasing the rope and the bleach, the rope, actually, the ends of the rope can be matched together from where it was taken and cut, and they can put a bunch of physical evidence to prove this case if it's out there. His attorney should fight that and give him the best defense possible, and he is, as they are true, it's true, he's innocent until proven guilty, but it looks like Chicago police have got probable cause and enough that they've convinced the prosecutor to bring a criminal charge against him, and he will be arraigned on that soon.
You mentioned the immense amount of resources and money and staff that poured into this investigation, almost a months-long investigation. Could he be charged a restitution to the state? I mean, you're looking at potentially tens of thousands of dollars in resources that were thrown at this investigation.
I would encourage the superintendent and his legal team to do just that, to make a request that any disposition in this case involves repaying the citizens of Chicago for resources that might have been wasted. That's if he is determined to be guilty, but I certainly would like to see the judge, if they find that he did this, hold him accountable both criminally and civilly.
Got it. And we, as we know, he conducted interviews during the course of that investigation where he made very emotional statements. Final thought here, Daniel, could those be used against him in this?
Absolutely. Anything he said in public can be used against him. If it was a statement that he gave to police freely and voluntarily, that can be used against him.
Got it.
So we've got to wait and see.
All right. We got to wait and see. Top of the hour, we will get an update. Daniel Linsky, thank you.
In the meantime, there's a new billboard just off Times Square slamming Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Here it is. She's taken a lot of heat for cheering the decision of Amazon not to build a headquarters here in New York City. Also, the woman who left Alabama to join ISIS in Syria is now pleading to come back home. The Trump administration says that, however, will not happen. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser will take that up next.
I think it's very, very dangerous when this administration attempts to strip American citizens, people who have been citizens for decades, of their citizenship.
A citizen, she ought not return to this country, nor is she entitled to U.S. citizenship.
Is that because she was the daughter of a diplomat and she was born here? Is that?
That's right.
Well, the Trump administration denying a plea from ISIS bride Hoda Muthana to return home and stand trial, saying she is not an American citizen. She is a terrorist. The 24-year-old Alabama woman went to Syria 4 years ago, marrying 3 ISIS fighters and calling for death to Americans on Twitter. Let's bring in Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for democracy. Dr. Jasser, I appreciate your time this morning. So let's start first with how she got here.
Well, it's amazing how her attorney, who works for the Council on American Islamic Relations, wastes no opportunity to turn every Muslim, no matter how radical, into a victim. She's not a victim. She was not only radicalized by the movement, but burned her passports, proudly declared war on America, and then joined ISIS, reportedly participated in numbers of war crimes, including slavery of other women, rape of other women and other brides, saw beheadings and tortures and other crimes committed while she was in Syria. So now all of a sudden she's giving interviews to ABC saying, oh, I want to pay back my debt to society through therapy, that somehow this is just something she can shed off. She became not only a terrorist, she became an enemy of our country. And if she did believe in the citizenship oath, which likely wasn't valid because she's the daughter of a diplomat, but if she did believe in that, she abandoned it and actually violated it and became an enemy combatant.
Let's deal with what we know at this point and what her legal team has actually released. And again, we'll be talking to them coming up. But here's the birth certificate. This was provided by her attorney. They put it out there on Twitter for everybody to see, making the case that she's an American citizen born in Hackensack, New Jersey in the early 90s. So they provide that, and also a letter showing that her father was not actually a diplomat when she was born, which would make her birthright citizenship legal in the case here, which means that it makes the case for them asking for due process back here in the United States. Your thoughts on all of that?
I'm trying to understand how they're helping her, because there's two paths here. The bottom line, I think Secretary Pompeo and President Trump are doing her a service by not letting her back in, because she was the daughter of a diplomat, whether it was a few months in which she stopped being so or not. She was, and diplomatic children do not become citizens. That's not part of birthright citizenship. Now, if she is allowed in, the other path she could have is to come in and get due process of law as a citizen, which I hope would include imprisonment and then a trial for treason and committing acts of war against her own country. That does not include any freedom that I would ever hope for in the next decades, let alone in the next few years, which she hopes she's going to pay back by therapy. So I have no idea what the approach is, other than, again, to make every most radical Muslim into a victim, which actually is helping radicalize Muslims. Right, and I hope every Muslim knows, yes.
On that point, and I want to take you up on that, and you got cut off a little bit. They're making the case that he was not a diplomat, by the way, at the time of her birth. And that's what we're going to hear more about. But let me just read you this from her lawyer, who's going to appear on this program in a short while. The government needs to engage with her, but not just her, all of these people who joined ISIS from the West. That is her direct words. And I want to throw this up on the screen here. We had our brain room look up some of the recent statistics on this sort of movement with American ISIS fighters, and here's what we found. The George Washington University put this out. Estimated 300 Americans attempted to join ISIS and other radical Islamic groups, 64 American jihadist travelers to Iraq and Syria from the dates 2011 to 2018. Dr. Jasser, 12 of those Americans have returned home. What should we make of that?
It's amazing to me. I mean, he's saying the government needs to engage with them? No. We need to reject Islamists. We need to reject jihadists and people who trample on our Constitution, trample on our citizenship oath. So no, there are millions of American Muslims and people who want to come back that are true humanitarian victims of the Syrian conflict. And by the way, her attorney is from the same town in Aleppo that my family's from, that is suffering from a revolution and radicalization of not only ISIS, but the Syrian government and other radicals that her attorney, by the way, apologized for Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups. So it's always America's fault, and yet they don't have the strength of character to stand against terrorists like this and say, you know what, there are millions of other humanitarian cases that we should take up and pay attention to, and ignore the militants that should actually, if the message is going to be one of American strength, they should get the message that jihadists have no space here and they need to be rejected legally with the full brunt of our law.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, we appreciate you coming on. We're going to learn a whole lot more here shortly. Thank you. We're going to get the family side of all this. Our headliner this morning will be her attorney, Hassan Shibli. He will join us at 10:30, just a short time from now.
Looking forward to talking to him. In the meantime, you see this last night, Duke, Carolina. Unbelievable moment. Duke, Zion Williamson. Watch him. 30 split his sneaker like a banana. It was a Nike, size 15. He left the game, did not come back. We're told he's got a mild knee sprain in his right knee, so it's the opposite leg. North Carolina played a great game. They won at 88-72. Awesome rivalry. Fantastic player right there. Hope for the best on that.
Well, I'm awake
How
now.
about that?
Man, did you go to sleep last night? Because that went pretty late.
He is some 6'7", 245, 18 years old. Really a star player.
All right, what a game.
Best to him. Yeah.
Now to this, a former top attorney at the FBI saying it dropped the ball on the Clinton email investigation. Why he claims the former Secretary of State should have been prosecuted. Trey Gowdy will join us later in the show.
Also, Sandra, the lawyers for the Covington Catholic student hitting the Washington Post with a massive lawsuit. One of them, one of the attorneys, Tom McMurtry, joins us live to make his case coming up next, right here.
The Twitter mob cannot attack him. It needs to be changed so that when a organization like the Washington Post decides to write an article without doing any investigation and breaching every journalistic standard out there, that they can be held accountable.
They wanted to jump into the mob, give the mob a megaphone so that they could attack this boy because he was white, he was Catholic, and he was wearing a Make America Great Again cap. If Nicholas had not purchased that souvenir cap that day at the mall, if he was not wearing it, none of us would know who Nicholas Sandmann is.
Well, there's Lynn Wood there, co-counsel Nick Sandmann, who's suing the Washington Post for defamation. His lawyers call the coverage a modern form of McCarthyism, say they ignored basic journalistic standards to advance an agenda against the president. Todd McMurtry is also part of the legal team with me now out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And Todd, thank you for your time and good morning to you. I saw a comment that said it's not about the money, although it's a lot of money, $250 million. It's about the message. What is the message here, Todd?
Well, the message is very important, Don, and that is that we cannot tolerate a media establishment that goes after minors, 16-year-old boys, and completely destroys the reputation and then says that's okay and moves on to the next story. It's totally unacceptable.
Okay, now, the Post has vast financial resources. And I mentioned the sum you're looking for, right? $50 million compensatory, $200 million punitive. Is it about the money and not the message?
Well, the money is certainly the message, and so those are intertwined very carefully. And in this circumstance, we have a new type of damages, and those are perpetual reputational damages. Other commentators have sought to say that our damages are too high, but when you think about that those damages never go away and live on the internet forever, I think they're appropriate in this circumstance.
Here's what the Washington Post says. Statement, we're reviewing a copy of the lawsuit. It's only one line, and we plan to mount a vigorous defense. Don't you have to prove malice? And if so, how do you do that, Todd?
Bill, I do not think we have to prove malice, but even if we had to, we would be able to do that. First, Nick Sandmann is a private individual, so we only have to prove negligence. However, if a ruling were to be different and they were to consider him an involuntary public figure and we had to prove malice, we would be able to do that because the Washington Post is a weaponized news outlet that used its power and strength to destroy Nick Sandmann's reputation, and they did that without adequate and appropriate levels of journalistic integrity and reporting, and that in itself is malicious. Okay. So I feel comfortable with either standard.
A couple more quick questions. I want to play a little bit of what we were picking up back in the day, as I'm sure you're quite familiar. Kentucky law says the paper's allowed to retract and issue an apology, retract the story within 10 days. If that is the case, does that make your lawsuit moot?
Well, I don't think that the Washington Post can ever adequately retract because of this concept of perpetual reputational damages. They can try, and they do have 10 days to do that. But ultimately, the jury will decide whether the retraction is adequate. So they have a mountain of retraction to try to put forth to
it's a degree
to do
or
it
it's a
effectively.
measure of the retraction. That's what I'm hearing from you. Is that right?
That's right. If you destroy somebody's reputation on the front page, you can't go to the B section and put it on the back page and say we're sorry.
Okay, so the Archdiocese apologized. Does that make do you drop the case against them or not?
No. I mean, the Diocese of Covington squeezed a half apology midway into a paragraph. That apology is not at all related or similar in size to the damage that their statement did. The Diocese of Covington statement was used nationally and internationally as a truthful statement, and the person who repeats that statement and the person who makes the statement are both liable. So the Diocese of Covington put that statement out there and did a lot of damage to Nick's reputation, and that retraction is inadequate.
I apologize for interrupting you.
Yes.
They are still on the list then, correct?
That's okay. Absolutely.
Okay. There is a list, I think, of 51 different media entities and individuals. This is just a sample of what was going down in mid-January around this case. Watch here.
They're all jeering and they're dancing. He's got this smug look on his face. And let's not lie. Everyone that sees that smug look wants to punch that kid.
That young man there does not look like someone who is appreciative and considerate of this culture and this chant going on.
I blame that kid. What a little...
Okay, none of it is great in reflection here. Is Trevor Noah on your list? Is CNN on your list? Is Bill Maher on your list, sir?
Well, certainly CNN and Bill Maher did things that we consider to have crossed the line. We think that the statements they made are defamatory. They're not humorous. And so certainly Bill Maher is somebody that we're looking at very carefully, and HBO for allowing him to make those defamatory statements.
Okay, but
CNN also...
Not Trevor Noah, correct? I want to be clear on this.
I am honestly not familiar enough with what Trevor Noah said. The one who said, punch that kid? No, that person is most definitely on the list.
Okay, so who is next then? If the Washington Post was lined up first, sir, who do you go after next?
We have not decided whom we will sue next. However, we're discussing that, and these lawsuits will continue to roll out over the next 30 to 60 days.
Todd McMurtry, thank you, sir, for your time out of Cincinnati, Ohio, just across the river there from Covington, Kentucky, and the home of Covington Catholic. Thank you, sir. We'll follow it.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, we are just moments away now from a news conference with Chicago police as Jussie Smollett faces a felony charge in the alleged hate crime attack.
Also in a moment, U.S. Coast Guard officer accused of planning a domestic terror attack. Authorities finding a stockpile of weapons at his home and a hit list as well. A live report on that, what we're learning today, coming up.
Domestic terror plot. Coast Guard Lieutenant Christopher Hassan facing a federal judge today on weapons and drug charges. Prosecutors say he stockpiled guns and a massive amount of ammunition while making a hit list of prominent Democrat politicians. Lucas Tomlinson's live from the Pentagon Force this morning with an update. Lucas?
Prosecutors say the active duty acquisitions officer worked at Coast Guard headquarters for the past 3 years. Prosecutors say inside his home, the FBI discovered 15 firearms and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition, according to court documents. Lieutenant Christopher Paul Hassan allegedly planned to kill top Democratic lawmakers and media personalities at MSNBC and CNN. The 49-year-old Coast Guard lieutenant was previously enlisted in the Marine Corps from 1988 to 1993 and later served in the Army National Guard. The self-described white supremacist was obsessed with neo-Nazi views and wanted to establish a white homeland and said, "I am dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on Earth." Court documents also provide more shocking details. Quote, "The defendant intends to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country." The FBI arrested Lieutenant Hassan at his home in Silver Spring, Maryland, just 8 miles from Capitol Hill last Friday. Investigators also found a hit list including Democratic Senators Richard Blumenthal, Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker. Court documents called Hassan a domestic terrorist who spent hours online studying the 1,500-page manifesto of a Norwegian terrorist who unleashed deadly attacks in 2011, killing 77 people in Norway. In addition to the weapons, the FBI also seized 30 vials of human growth hormone and thousands of narcotic pills. Hassan will appear in a federal courthouse in Maryland this afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. Fox will be live outside the courthouse. Prosecutors say this is just the tip of the iceberg. Sandra?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson, thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. I want to take you up to Chicago right now in a moment here. Police going to hold a news conference moments from now. New details in the Jussie Smollett matter. The actor arrested, turned himself in overnight earlier today, facing a felony charge for filing a false report. We will take you live to Chicago, let you know what police tell us as soon as that begins. Right now, quick commercial break. We're back in a moment.